My father was born in 1912 in Manchester, and the very fact of his coming into the world at all was quite theatrical, because my grandparents were in America, where they were touring with Charles Foreman, and he wanted to make my grandmother a star in America, and he offered her another contract, and they were involved in part of another contract. But she was rather unhappy about it because she already had a 2-year-old son, John, the eldest, and she was missing him terribly, and of course then there were no flights, so there was no way that she was going to get back to him. So when they thought about it and how they'd get out of the contract, the only thing was to become pregnant, and that was my father. So literally he was born in a trunk in the backstage theatre. So they came back to Manchester, and my grandfather got a part in the repertory company with Annie Horniman again, and he was born there. So after him there was his sister Mary, and she was in 1914, and then Anne in 1915. And all of them really became involved in the theatre one way or the other. John, the eldest, he went into the Navy first, and then he was in the war, and he was in prison camp for quite a long time, because he was very early in the war. He was captured. And he was mad keen to be a Navy admiral or something, but of course he was so long in the camp that he started producing plays. And the bug got him, and by the time he got out he didn't want to be in the Navy anymore, so he became a director of plays and ended up in Australia directing plays out there, and eventually joined PA Consultants, but in a sort of a dramatic way, giving dramatic talks or something. Then my father became an actor. Mary, she was the first Wendy in Barry's Peter Pan. And when we were going through all the documents to give to the archive, there was a letter from Barry himself to my grandmother saying, you know, booking her as Wendy. She didn't stay on in the theatre, she became more of a musician. And Anne, the youngest, she was an actress, and she played St. Joan herself, actually. And she married an actor, Douglas Campbell, and they went to Canada and became very involved in Tyrone Guthrie's theatre in Stratford, Ontario. So that was all of them. But they started very young in the theatre, and my father was only 3 when he gave his first performance. I think my grandmother had a problem with babysitters or something. But she was in Julius Caesar, and she was playing Portia. And so she obviously knew to look after John or my father. And she popped them both into tunics, and away they came. They followed her off the stage afterwards. So I suppose the only way she keep an eye on them, I don't know. But anyway, obviously she didn't keep a good enough eye on them, because she gave her great speech and made a great big sort of flourish, thinking that the boys were behind, but they weren't behind. And next thing was, there was a great roar of applause, and finally they came off stage. And she said, "What did you two do?" And they said, "Oh, we just went up." It was a scene where Cinna the poet is killed. "We went up to the poor man lying on the ground, and we were sorry." And of course they got a great round of applause, which proves you should never act with children on So anyway, both he and John went into the Navy. He went to Dartmouth, and John went to the Merchant Navy School, which was unusual. I'm most unlikely person you'd have thought for the Navy, my father. But apparently he was very good, particularly at the knots. He said he was very good at making knots. And so he was doing very well, and everybody thought, this is marvellous, and he was there for 4 years. And then suddenly it occurred to him at the age of 17 that if you were a sailor and if there was a war, then you'd have to kill people. And he was a pacifist. So he had sort of almost a breakdown about this, and he couldn't face it. So then they had to buy him out, so he came out. And where did he go from there? Talk about a career change. He joined the ballet. So it was quite literally a jump. He joined Robert Helpman's company. He had, but I mean, he was too old really to start becoming a real full-time ballet dancer. But it was wonderful training for him, and came in wonderfully useful later, because he worked with the deaf children and did movement with them in the Dominicans here in Cabra later on. So he went anyway to drama school, and he followed the family tradition. And he then got jobs in repertory companies, and one was in Perth, and he met the MacLeod family, and the MacLeod's daughter, she was 15, she had a harp, and she introduced him to the harp, and he was completely won over by this, and he bought his first clairshot. And so he learned how to play that. Then he went to Australia with the family. They were taking St. Joan, and he had, one of his parts was, they didn't have all the wonderful contraptions they have now for scenery. So in the stream where in St. Joan the wind changes and the flag has to turn, my father was underneath the set on the stream turning the flag. So that was his great big thing. He used to always laugh and say that was his big part in St. Joan. But he came back from that and did more repertory company work. And then he was out of work, and his agent told him there was a job going in Dublin. They were looking for a juvenile lead in the Gate Theatre with Hilton Edwards and Michael McLemore. So over he came, and he got the job, brought the harp with him, and arrived at the digs of Mrs. O'Shea's in a carriage, in a white corduroy suit and a harp. And it was a wonderful actors' digs in O'Kelly's Corner. And Mrs. O'Shea was a singer herself, and her husband had been, he was dead, he was a very well-known tenor. So there was music all over Mrs. O'Shea's house. And upstairs she'd have all the Thomas Moores and the classical numbers and around the piano, and downstairs was more Hoolies. And her daughter was a great friend of Delia Murphy's, and Delia Murphy introduced him to all these wonderful songs, Finian's Way, Courtin In The Kitchen, all of them. So downstairs they sang all the songs. So really my father and his harp had found their true home here in Ireland. And he learnt all these songs and had a wonderful time. So in memory of Delia and and I know some of you before because I've sung this song and you've joined in. So Courtin In The Kitchen, if you would join in the chorus, that would be lovely.